What we're trying to do here is use regenerative principles in our market style garden. And part of that means that we want to disturb the soil as little as possible when we're harvesting, planting, and preparing the bed. That's commonly referred to as no-till or no-dig gardening or farming. So I'm just going to walk you through sort of how I harvest things in a way that sort of leaves the life in the soil. So when I pull something out of the soil, like this nice turnip here, right here. So I get this turnip out. Thankfully, turnips and a lot of root veg grow almost on top of the soil. The tuber grows up on top. Also, look how beautiful that nice purple turnip is. So what I'm trying to do is when I harvest something, it's not such an issue with turnips, is I'm trying to like take out the least amount of soil possible when I pull something up. When I harvest pepper plants, when it's done for the year, I just cut them off right at the base of the stalk, right along the furrow, and I leave the root system in there. And part of the reason for that is that those roots will continue to add nutrients and provide a ecosystem for microbes that are really important to fertilizing plants. And it also means that we're not turning the soil up and sort of breaking it down, so we're making it more erosion resistant. One of the little things you might find that you can see from the naked eye is earthworms. In a healthy garden, oftentimes you'll find earthworms right around the root mass of the plant that you've harvested. And the reason for that is that there's all kinds of goodies for them, like sugars and carbon and microbes that the worms love to eat and process. And they're found right in a small area around the roots called the rhizome. It's just a tiny little space where the root gives out sugars and also takes nutrients back in. So I found an earthworm in there, so that means we're doing well. You can see how little soil I've left on the plant when I've taken it out. And that's basically how I'm going to harvest all of these turnips. I'm going to just try to impact the soil as little as possible when I'm taking things out, so I can keep these little fellas happy and keep them fertilizing the soil. So let's continue doing that. So I'm going to get my harvest bin here. And show you another one. So I just grab them by the stalk and I give them a little twist. Try to leave the most amount of root mass I can in there. And there we go. There's another earthworm right in there. So that shows you right there. That's really important stuff. If I was to just take, when I harvested, come over and turn up all this soil, I would destroy the ecosystem that these guys are sort of feeding on. And worms, if you might know, provide great fertilizer for plants. They create a lot of organic matter in the soil, which is sort of what nutrient molecules stick to, and that our plants feed on in turn. So that's what we got going on, and we'll try to return that little fella from whence he came and continue on. Okay, so normally I would completely clear this bed out of everything growing in it. However, with an autumn garden, what can happen is some vegetables might grow a little slower because they're not photosynthesizing as well, or some myriad of factors. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to leave a few of these turnips in and see if we can get something out of them. Which kind of brings me to another point with regenerative agriculture. One of the things we want to do is we want to keep the soil always full of plant matter. We never want to leave the soil bare. Part of the reason for that is soil erosion. If there's roots in the ground, it means that our soil is more stable, it's less likely to be windblown, or if it rains hard, it's less likely to erode through water erosion. The other thing is if our soil is photosynthesizing, even if it has weeds in it, that means that there's nutrients going into the soil, like those sugars that the worms and the microbes like near the root base. That's returning good nutrients to the soil, and also it's creating an environment for microbes and bacteria, all the good stuff that creates fertilizer for us to grow our plants. It makes it unnecessary for us to use chemical fertilizers. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a rake, and again we're going to try to as minimally as possible. It's okay. No dig doesn't mean you don't disturb the soil, because we are going to have to plant into this. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually rake over this, and we're just going to kind of tease the top, because the top couple inches is essentially where you would seed into or plant into. But what we're looking to do right now is we're going to just level out our garden bed. And the reason why we want to create a nice level surface is so that we get nice even sun exposure. If we were to have something that was concave or convex, even a little bit of sunlight lost because other plants are standing up and some are down in the gully, that would mean that the ones on the outside would grow faster and the ones in the center wouldn't get as much light, and they would be overshadowed by the ones on the edges. So we want to sort of make sure the bed's nice and flat and level. That also helps with water retention again. If it's flat, the water gets dispersed evenly. It doesn't roll off the shoulders or sink into the middle. So we're going to prepare the bed like that, and then we're going to put a little bit of compost on top of the bed. So I'm going to go ahead and keep preparing this for the compost, and then we'll talk about how to plant. All right, so what we have going on here is I've raked and leveled the bed, disturbing the soil as little as possible, just sort of teasing it up in the first inch or two. And then I've poured on some of the compost that we made at the local through this year. And this is sort of more of a deep mulch compost. So some composts can be designed for high nutrient input, so nitrogen heavy, fertilizers. This one, we sort of balanced the carbon and nitrogen ratio so that we can put more on top, which helps us suppress weeds, and it also helps add more organic matter to the soil like we were talking about earlier. So I've raked and leveled that, so now we're going to get ready to plant. And what we're going to plant is we're following the turnips with rutabaga, which is essentially the same thing, but it's a frost hardy thing. We don't have to worry too much about the significance of crop rotation at this point, where this is going to be a really slow grow. We've just fertilized the bed. We only need to do this once a year, by the way, the compost application. This will last all year, deliver enough nutrients to the soil, and we won't have to worry about it until next year. So we're going to go ahead and start planting. I've got little soil blocks. This is how we plant at the local, as we create little soil blocks. They're a little soggy right now. We create these little soil blocks here, so we don't use any plastic. I mean, this is a plastic container, of course, and so our harvesting bins. But basically what we're looking to do is minimize our usage of plastic, and this is also a really healthy way to start seedlings out. And what I've done also, I'm soaking the roots right now inside this white bin in sort of a compost tea extract that I've made at the local. So it's essentially in an inoculant, which that's just sort of a fancy way of saying we're introducing the right microbial and bacterial life to support the plant and to get it off on its best legs, so that it won't be attacked by anaerobic bacteria or things that we wouldn't want the plant ingesting or coming into contact with. So we're trying to encourage the right sort of life in the soil by introducing that. So we'll have another video on how I create that, how we create that at the greenhouse. But for now, we're going to go ahead and start plugging these little guys in the ground. I have a trowel here somewhere, I promise. There it is. Let me grab that. All right. So a lot of growers like to make sure that their spacing is really even, so they maximize their space. And you can actually draw lines on the soil. We're not going to worry too much about that today for the sake of brevity. And also, we only have so many to plant in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to just sort of create a pattern where it creates a little bit of a hole so we can plug the plant in there. We've got lots of good nutrients there. And we're going to sort of offset them. Sort of like you'd see a number 4 or 5 on a dice. That's what we're looking for. And another thing to consider too when you're doing no dig is we're using the root structures to help with compaction. And when soil's too compact or compressed, it's hard for the roots to press out into the soil and grow. So that can be a consideration. And if that were the case, that we had a bed here that was like really hard for the trowel to get down into, but you can see it sinks in fairly easily, we would just fork it. We would take a pitchfork and just sort of like lightly loosen, not turn, just loosen the soil up a little bit to allow for a little bit more air in there, which would help with aeration and compaction. So we're just going to continue. And another important thing when you're thinking about planting is think about how big the plant is going to be when you're finished. So, I mean, this guy's really little right now, and we're going to put him deep in the hole. But a rutabaga plant, as we saw with the turnips, is going to be, the foliage will be up to here. It'll be yay wide. So we just want to make sure we're giving the plants enough space to grow. Sometimes it's tempting to put a lot of plants really close together when they're small because you think you're increasing the harvest, but that's not in fact the case. You want to give them appropriate amount of space so that they can get to a full maturity in a healthy way, and that way you'll have healthier vegetables and actually bigger vegetables just by virtue of giving them more space. Kind of like the goldfish principle. Look at this guy I found here. Got a nice big night crawler. That's not what we use in our compost bins. This is a different kind of worm, but they're still valuable. Their vermicast is great, and they also aerate the soil. So that's always nice to see nice worms in the soil. So once I've got these holes dug, just prepare a couple more here. What I like to do is one of two things. I'll either put vermicast right in around the root structure if I think that the plant's going to need a little leg up. This is looking pretty healthy, and what I'm going to do instead of actually putting physical or solid compost or solid fertilizer is I'm going to plug these guys in, and then I'm going to go along and I'm going to actually water it with some of that microbial tea extract that we were talking about, compost tea extract. So I've got it in this bucket here. So I can pop the lid off. I kind of jammed it on this morning pretty hard. Just like the blooper moment. But yeah, I got it. Yeah. Alright. Still have the finger strength from rock climbing, even though I haven't been to a gym in 2 years or something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of compost tea into these holes. Like that. And again, we're just trying to introduce the right type of bacteria and microbial life to our plants early on, their seedlings, so they start off on the right foot. So I'm going to go ahead and plant all these bad boys here, as people like to joke that I say all the time. And then we're going to talk about how we're going to protect these guys, because I don't know if you can see it on camera right now, but we do have some snow falling. So when these guys are so small, if the snow were to get up over top of the seedling, that would sort of inhibit sun getting to the plant. It might not necessarily actually hurt the actual seedling, but what it would do is make it so that photosynthesis would arrest, and we need photosynthesis for growth. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll talk about protecting them. All right, so now we're going to talk about just quickly how to protect winter crop snow. Doing this will help keep the snow off the plants themselves, and it will also make sure that our soil doesn't freeze, essentially. So we're going to create a mini caterpillar tunnel or cold house, as Derek has just reminded me that they're sometimes called. So what we've got is these little bendy dudes, more plastic, boo, and we're going to go ahead and stick them in the dirt like this, like that, and we're going to make a hoop, and that's sort of going to become the skeleton of our tunnel. Just make sure you sink them in nice and well, just bearing in mind that these are kale here, so we're going to try and keep a good clearance so the kale plants can grow and they don't actually hit the poly. And then what I like to do is, these are kind of the length that you'd want to sort of space handling. So we do just another length there, like this. Sink it in, sink it in. going to do that all the way down the furrow. You can buy these little hoops from local agriculture stores. I got these from, we're in Stratford. I got them from Dubois Ag Renovation. They're a Quebec company, Canadian, and got a few other agricultural products from them. And they've been working really great. And I'm looking forward to getting some more stuff for them to be able to extend the season and grow more healthy food for our community. So as you can see, it doesn't take a lot of time to do this, but it's certainly helpful. Extend the season. We mostly get wind in from this side, so we're going to make sure we really weight down this side really well because we don't want the poly blowing off on us. And then we're going to put probably more limited stones on the other side because you don't seem to see too much wind coming in from the southeast. So Derek and I are going to try and roll this bad boy out. All right, so as you can see, what we've created here is a caterpillar tunnel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sort of tension these, make sure there's not too much sag in them. And poly is nice because, for one thing, this is recycled. So we used to have a poly roof on top of our greenhouse. And this is basically just recycled fabric from that. Slippery stuff. Hey there. Hi. That's an authentic Canadian moment too. Like a musher at work. Just have people preparing their sled dogs for the year, because that's what we do up here in Canada. That's how we get around in the winter. Mostly sled dogs, because we get so much snow. So more or less, that's going to be our caterpillar tunnel. I'm going to try and probably tuck these edges in a little more so that the wind doesn't catch them up. That's the other nice thing about the furrows too, is sort of like each furrow acts as a bit of a windbreak to keep things down so the wind doesn't catch the edges. So that's how we're going to protect our plants this winter, is we're just going to use recycled poly from our greenhouse renovation. And if you're looking to put poly over your garden this winter to extend the season, you can ask local greenhouses if you know there's a local greenhouse in your area that might use a material like this, or a local farmer. A lot of them, only use the poly for a certain amount of time, and then have to unfortunately throw it in the trash. So if you can contact somebody, you'll probably be able to get some of this for free to be able to do it your own home garden. And you can give this a shot, okay? Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. It was informative and fun. And we'll catch you next time. Have a good one.